Hello, everybody. This is Anna and Brian from a World podcast, and today we have our next guest for Web3 episode, Alex from a Simplicity Group. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Surviving.
It's Friday, so
We all are.
almost there. And I hope it's just like as well today, even though we all in London, so it's finally very warm and very sunny. So I'm just looking forward of like finishing it and just like going and catching some sunshine. And maybe as well, just like, can you give like a quick introduction to yourself and your background so our listeners know your story, where are you coming from?
Sure. So I've been studying economics since about 13 years old, so since very young in school, all the way up until uni, well, including in uni. Met my co-founder there as well. We've been in crypto since about 2017, like trading, investing, researching, just being retail in essence. Made a lot of money, of course, round-tripped and lost all the money that we've made, classic stuff. And then eventually got a job at Coin Bureau. And then we both got a job at a crypto VC, which turned into an incubator. It was based out of Dubai. And we just realized that the advice that we were being told to give just wasn't really the most accurate, in particular when it came to tokenomics, because people in general just don't have an education in economics. So tokenomics, of course, is derivative of that. That's why you see a lot of just the table of allocations, and people are like, yep, that's enough, and governance and staking with to do, there's my token utilities. Of course, that's terrible. But, no one really cared. So we thought, why don't we make our own company about this and, really try and deliver good level of tokenomics. So we launched Simplicity Group at this point, like 3 years ago now, peak bear market in 2022. Somehow survived, kept growing, and expanded into a nice sizable company now, where we still specialize in tokenomics. We do designs, audits, modeling, advisory, but we also expanded into having some other services. So we do research, we do marketing now as well. Onboarded someone who's very good, and turns out that we can actually scale that whole arm. And we also have a little ventures arm on the side as well with our syndicate, where we invested into like 8 projects, 8 or 9. Just waiting for them to launch.
I guess, stepping back a little bit, like what attracted you to this entire field, like coming from economics and then you saw maybe crypto and Web3, like what made you think that this is the future, and why did you, for example, want to, I guess, spending time growing your career in this direction rather than sort of traditional finance?
Well, I don't know what it was, but I always knew I wanted to do something with money. Like, I don't know, just money seemed to be the king of everything, right? Well, to be fair, actually, no, that's not true. I wanted to either do something in politics or with money. And then when I got into uni and I was doing, economics and politics, I realized that all of my modules on politics were actually about things like filibustering or just other shenanigans in terms of, politicians, basically. And I realized this is really just not it, is it? So after that, I kind of dove a lot deeper into, economics, finance, etc. And, that's around the same time that I started to get into crypto, because I first got into trading just in general, and then eventually branched out into crypto trading. And then from there started learning more. And, the main thing about crypto, of course, is the fact that it is money, right? At the end of the day, it's mediums of exchange, it's currencies. So I really like the tech, and I was really sold on the vision that, we're going to revolutionize the financial system, that, banks will be no more. Everyone will be using, cryptocurrencies and tokens, and because it's just infinitely better than a bank, like everyone gives this example. You send money abroad to someone, it takes 7 business days. It should take 5 seconds, like it does when you're sending, crypto to someone. And the whole idea of revolutionizing the financial system was one thing that was kind of fun. But another element is it's the decentralization aspect, where I'm at the time, I wasn't particularly frustrated with middlemen, but the older I get, the more I realize there's so many little fees that I pay for no particular reason, just because someone is in the middle, and it's very annoying. So decentralizing stuff, whether it's financial systems or even economic systems, not economic, political systems, is just a better way to achieve a more fair result, I think, in a lot of aspects of life. And yeah, I got sold on that. Of course, now in 2025, I think it's common knowledge that the majority of that is just a fugazi. It's just all fluff, and it's not actually ever going to happen because of all the scams and all of the fantastic lack of regulation, especially now what's going on in America is fantastic. How they're shutting down all of the regulatory bodies for crypto. It's just, go ahead, guys, scam, please scam some more. We are not going to prosecute you. So that's amazing. So I've been very happy for the last year in this lovely industry. But to be fair, of course, the tech is still great. Don't get me wrong, just for clarity, the tech is still great. And that's something that inspired me back in the day, to answer your question. And it's still something that inspires me today. But we've kind of shifted the focus to work with select few companies that we think are actually going to make a difference. And that's been good. So yeah, there's still a light here.
Maybe can you, if you can, share some examples of like when you're helping other companies with like tokenomics, or like what are you doing in Simplicity Group, and maybe you can shine a little bit of light of your mentoring kind of positions as well. So that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So we do, as I said, designs, audits, modeling, and advisory. In essence, on a high level, we help projects figure out their utilities, the economy behind the utilities. So who's buying the token, how much are they buying, how much is being required to stake, how much is being rewarded, how many fees there are, like the whole... It's kind of like what we do is what the central bank and the government does with a fiat currency, but we do it on the token scale, basically, right? All the laws and systems around fiat, we do the same thing for tokens. And we do that either from scratch, so the designing, or if you already have something figured out, then we audit it, make sure that it all makes sense. Typically, when we do audits, we find that it doesn't not make sense at all. The main problem, actually a little highlight, is valuations. People just have no idea what token valuations actually mean. They think $50 million FTV, so like a valuation on launch, is fine. It really isn't in 99% of cases, because that just implies that there's $50 million worth of sell pressure, which you need a lot of buy pressure to counteract. Without going deep into it, basically what we find in our audits is that a lot of projects will just have tokens that launch and then go straight down. I don't know if that's, if the image is reflected, mirrored or not, but you get what I mean. So yeah, we try and help prevent that, whether it's designing everything from scratch, whether it's in the audit. With the modeling, again, same fundamentals. We do stochastic models. So we take your buy pressure, we take your sell pressure, we take how it all interacts within the economy, and then we simulate the price, the revenues, users, whatever else you want us to simulate. And again, we can see what will happen to your token, assuming the conditions of your economy and so on. Same thing. We just want to help you prevent your token from listing and then going straight to zero, which is what happens basically to most projects that list. Not advisory for intros and whatever else that is needed, like strategy, product, marketing advice, etc. And yeah, so that's kind of what we do. And in terms of the mentorship, I guess I'd say, it's something that I just personally like doing. My co-founder Dan as well, he's a mentor in quite a few, ecosystems, incubators, whatever. But yeah, I've mentored quite a lot. Some notable recent ones. You have Outlier, there's Startup Booster. Now there's Techstars as well, which is quite good. And Techstars is solid, best accelerator in the world, actually, if you Google it. So that's fun. But yeah, so honestly, my thinking with that, because all of these, they don't pay you, right? Like you don't get paid. You just join some calls and you help out projects with whatever they need help with. And For us, the few key people that helped us on our journey, and without them, arguably Simplicity Group would not be a thing. So, I just want to share that as well. Like, I always have time if anyone needs genuine help, and it's not like, hey, can you help me improve your B2B sales by 100? Go away, right? I was gonna swear, but I don't know if this is a PG-13 podcast or not. I don't like that, right? But if you need genuine help, we're very happy to help you, because people have helped me, and I think it's only fair. It's actually quite funny, because what we do, we mentor from the perspective of tokenomics, but a lot of these projects don't need a token. So I go on these mentorship calls and I say, well, what do you do? How can I help? And they're like, hey, so, there was one project in Outlier Ventures. She was so successful. She was making like $3 million per month or something ludicrous. I think she was selling like wine or like customizable, I don't know, something along those lines. And she was like, yeah, I have a token. And, all these other mentors and Outlier have said, oh, yeah, you should definitely have a token. And I was just like, why? You don't need a token. It's just, you're going to launch. No one's going to buy it. You're going to damage your brand. And she was like, yeah, but everyone else has told me that I need a token. And then, since then, I was not invited back to mentor anyone else, because I told that to her and then to 5 other projects that you just don't need a token. You will spend, because people don't realize it's development costs. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of hassle. It's cost on things like CoinMarketCap listings, even centralized exchange listings. That's already hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Well, okay, it depends on the centralized exchange, but whatever. Liquidity, fundraising, audits, legal side, tokenomics side. It's mental how much effort goes into this. If you don't need it, don't do it. And that's kind of my whole idea with mentorship, is just to help projects prevent losing a lot of money or wasting a lot of money. And, for me, it's quite fun going on a call and saying, your idea is terrible. Don't do this. I don't know. It's a bit sadistic, but I mean,
but I think it's just like, it's probably because of when it was hype around like the Web3, a lot of people, when they don't need it. Yeah. What is going on right now with like AI, sometimes like you don't really need it in this project, but it's just because everyone is doing that. So yeah, but like from your perspective, what kind of like industries or like use cases there's just like, oh yeah, that's tokenomics, like Web3, definitely we need it over there, because otherwise it's just like it will not work. Maybe like your favorites, like if you have some.
So there's 2 very easy answers here. The first one is, when you're truly decentralized. Actually, not. Let's take a little step back. We have identified that there are only 3 reasons that you may need a token. Everything else is, you want a token and you can have a token and it can be good. That's nice. But you need a token only in 3 cases. And those are when you need to transfer data. Like, for example, like the whole ZK side of things, like you need to transfer data. You can do it in a token. You don't have to share it, whatever, right? You can do computations on it, blah, blah, blah. So you need a token. You can't really do that with Web2 tech, as far as I'm aware. The other thing is, when you're really decentralized, like you're actually not a company, you're a genuine DAO, which, by the way, most companies are not, just for absolute clarity there. But if you are a real DAO, like you're actually decentralized, you need a token in order to incentivize people to contribute and disincentivize people from being malicious, basically. And you see this in things like infrastructure projects, like layer ones to some extent, whereby, they need a token, because without it, they can't incentivize people to become validators. And on the flip side, the validators can become malicious if they don't have an upfront cost that they will lose the entire value of if they are malicious, i.e. with the slashing. And the third reason is, it's very similar to the second one. It overlaps, but it's more from the perspective of counterparty risk. So again, if you're layer 1, you can mitigate the incentive and you can mitigate the cost of corruption problem, i.e. preventing people from being malicious, by requiring people to stake Bitcoin, for example, right? And then if they're malicious, you can take it off them. But you can't you can't mint Bitcoin, so it's very expensive for you to reward users and like to solve the cold start problem without your own token, in essence, right? So that's a thing. But more importantly, if anything happens to Bitcoin, you, who is just a completely different project, is just screwed, basically, right? Because you're using someone else's currency. So to avoid that and to alienate yourself from the rest of the market or any other entity out there, whether it's Bitcoin or someone else, stable coins, whatever, you have your own currency. And that way you're completely not decentralized internally, but externally, right? You're decentralized from anyone else. Like there's no counterparty risk associated with you. There is, of course, like narrative and industry risk and whatever, but generally speaking. So these are the three reasons, of which these two are kind of very similar. And so it's information and like decentralization and avoiding counterparty risk. So for this, it's stuff like, all the projects doing healthcare related things, whether you have to share data and whatever else. Or even like NFTs, like when you're tokenizing, let's say everyone's favorite topic, tokenization, right? Let's say you tokenize a property, you can store data within like NFTs, like in the metadata, which says like, the last time this place got a fire equipment safety check was a year ago, and the last time there was a check for whatever you store, you can have all that data in a nice token, and it's just a lot easier to trade around, transfer, maybe even compute on it, whatever. So that's great. Albeit, it's more on the ZK side of things, where you need a token because you can also obviously just share Word documents when it comes to building history, but whatever. But the more kind of easier answer, which I was going to say a few minutes ago, was DePIN, to be honest, decentralized physical infrastructure networks, which a lot of projects are definitely not decentralized. It's all, again, a fugazi. It's all a lie. They're decentralized. They're as decentralized as Instagram, as I like to say, where everyone creates their own content, but it still goes onto the same server ran by the same company, which is the case with basically every DePIN project ever, because they either sell their own hardware or, all the software is managed, whatever, you get what I mean. But those projects, similar to infrastructure, and of course infrastructure and DePIN, I should have said probably, that's where you need a token. That's where tokens are very useful, because you can't really have that particular idea without a token, without a currency. So yeah, very long-winded, but that's kind of the full, the full story here of what needs a token and what I think is good.
Nice. Again, and I guess, as someone who's been in the field for, since, the time when the hype was really high for, all of crypto and Web3, and then as it goes through all these bumps and hills and troughs, how do you think the approach to sort of tokenization has changed over the years? Initially, we obviously had lots of these different rupples, NFT drops, all those kind of things, and to today, do you think there's been a significant change in how, I guess, people start new tokenized projects? What's your opinion?
So when you say tokenized, do you mean tokenizing assets? Or
yeah,
do you mean,
let's say that. Because I feel like maybe in the early years, it's still very experimental. People are trying different things that they could tokenize. Do you think that's sort of all settled down to a couple of things? Like you mentioned DePIN, obviously. Is that generally the kind of sense for the industry? You think it's kind of settled to a couple of nice use cases now?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
yeah, just your thoughts.
Yeah. I think when it comes to tokenizing assets, there has been a massive wave of, we need to tokenize everything and everything. It would be so much better if it was tokenized. And I think people are getting the rude awakening that it's very nice and cute to have a great idea about tokenizing property and, having the 60 million people in total in the entire Web3 industry be very happy about that. But the reality is no one else cares. Now, okay, there's a caveat here. Of course, a lot of people care when it comes to tokenization of assets. And you have, BlackRock and all these top banks and whatever saying tokenization is the future and everything else. And that's all great, so that's, I think, a step forward in terms of tokenizing assets. Like, I think from 2019, 2020, when this was starting to become a buzz, till now, there's definitely been a lot of maturity in the sense that the institutions are coming in because they're realizing the extra liquidity is fantastic. There is a question here, though, a bit of a tangent. There is a question: does extra liquidity make things more valuable or less valuable? Because you see, everyone thinks that it makes it more valuable, but does it? If you can very quickly buy and sell something, I don't know if that makes it more valuable, right? Because, and I can't remember. I read a post, or like I saw someone talking about like on a panel, but they raised a very good point, and I can't remember the evidence to this point, but that was their point. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that things will become more valuable. If you can very easily buy and sell it, there is I think the point was something like there is a lack of like entry barriers, and typically entry barriers are things that make things quite expensive. So there's that whole caveat to consider. But regardless, there's still maturity in the sense that people are realizing more liquid equals better, more valuable or not, questionable, but better, right? And easier, and so on. Now, I think a lot of people wanted to allow your typical person with $100, that they have saved up for 5 years. They now have $100. What can they invest into? And let's allow them to invest into property. This is basically every single pitch deck that tokenizes property. Every single pitch deck of a project that tokenizes property for the last 4 years. It's like, we are helping anyone invest into property. That's basically the exact same pitch. It's always boring, but that's exactly what they say, and that's it. The problem is that no one cares, right? Like, no one's going to go online and be like, how can I invest into property? Oh my God, Housecoin. No one's going to do that, right? People don't care. They're going to go on eToro or something and just buy the S&P 500 or Apple stock, right? That's the extent of it. Like, people in crypto over exaggerate the importance of this industry because they know what's going on. No one else does. Anyways, that's a whole other topic. Point being that I think there's a lot of maturity in the actual tokenization of assets elements, right? People are realizing the benefits, but on the flip side, people are realizing that nobody cares. And a lot of projects that were raising funds, it's actually quite hilarious. I've seen so many projects that have absolutely zero properties, but they're raising funds from a VC on the idea that they will then take that money, buy the property, tokenize it, and make loads more money. Obviously, they will fail because no one's giving you money to buy your properties. Or like, there's no proof that you can generate any sort of revenue whatsoever, so no one's going to give you money. So these projects are also they're just dying out. Like, this doesn't really happen anymore. So there's maturity on that front as well. Like, tokenization is starting to be kind of led by the institutional players, I think, I'd like to say, or at least by the kind of the top projects in crypto that actually have, like millions of dollars of assets, and they are allowing loads of people to participate. So that's kind of my view. I don't know if that gave any sort of actionable takeaways or not, but that's on the tokenizing elements.
And so maybe just like, if we'll go back, so for example, when you originally started, so what would you give advice to that person, like yourself, a younger version of yourself, especially in the current climate with well, all of the turbulence and everything what's going on right now with like politics, economical situation. So like, maybe like a couple of advice, apart from what you mentioned before, they're just like, you need to have like a good use case. So if you don't use tokenomics, if you don't have to.
So just for clarity, so it's advice for myself?
For myself or like yourself, kind of, or anyone who is trying to build like Web3 blockchain kind of related. But if you wish to just like, oh, if only I had this advice when I was younger. So something like between those lines.
There's a very common notion that a lot of successful founders or serial entrepreneurs share, and that is that first-time founders focus on everything. They focus on how they look, the website, the engagements, the presentations, the clients, the social media, everything. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and nth time founders focus on money. They focus on revenue and clients. That's it. They don't care about anything else. It's just revenue and clients. And we're first-time founders. Fundamentally, we have pivoted. We have made new arms. We have tried a product, and that didn't work out. No product market fit, unfortunately. It's a great product. It's a due diligence platform for investors. You can find loads of new projects with due diligence already done. Anyways, no one cares about due diligence. They just follow and invest in this market. So that's great. Not anyone. There's a few companies that do. Not enough though, but regardless. So, we're still first-time founders. And the main advice I'll give to myself, but also coincidentally to anyone starting any projects in crypto, is just focus on the revenue. Nothing else matters, to be honest. It doesn't matter whether your website was made on Wix or on Figma or on whatever other sites there are now. It doesn't matter whether your color scheme is white and black or blue and pink. It doesn't matter whether your logo is an apple or a globe. Of course, I'm being a bit facetious here. Of course, some of these things do matter. You can't have a bad website or a bad logo, whatever. But the most important thing is revenue. It's always revenue. It's always clients. And that's it. Nothing else should matter at all, anywhere near as much as that. And, now, of course, the focus is, from our side is greatly more focused on revenue and stuff, but, still find ourselves debating certain things, which at the end of the day, who cares? They're not bringing in money. Well, why are we even doing this in the first place? And same advice goes to any founder out there making their own project. You have to focus on revenue. And, to add a little cherry on top to that is, it's hilarious, but everyone in crypto thinks that they need VC money. It's the paradigm. You think of an idea, then you call yourself a project, not a company, may I add. In Web3, you have projects, as if you come home from school and you have a project with your parents to build a volcano, and you don't have to worry about revenue or clients. It's just all naturally going to happen. Why? Because you raise a lot of venture capital money, or venture capital, I guess. And that's it, right? Then you launch, and then everyone's a happy bunny. Everyone's tokens go up because of the bull market. That has been the case actually for 10 years, more or less, right? Well, not for 10, to be fair, because you had Bitcoin for the first couple only, but you get what I mean. And that worked, right? But the reality is starting to settle in now that, we have, the industry and a lot of founders in the industry, whether by choice or by accident, have scammed too much retail at this point, too many LPs, too many whales, too many everyone, that there's no more going to be a bull market where everything goes up, right? First of all, there's too many tokens, too many projects. But second of all, everyone ran out of money. The industry has scammed everyone out of money. That's it, right? You have to be an actual company again, right? You can't be a project. You have to be a company. And same thing with VCs, right? Everyone thinks that you need to raise VC money. You really don't. Like venture capital is a very relatively rare thing. You can just start a business. You don't need a fundraise. People in crypto just can't fathom that idea. It's genuinely bewildering, but they cannot comprehend the idea of not fundraising from VCs. So that's another bit of advice that I'd give to other founders is focus on revenue. Because now you're not raising money. You are not going to raise VC money. It's unfortunately, unless you're friends, you go to the pub with some guy who's a GP at a fund, you are raising zero, a massive fat zero, and that's it. There's nothing you can do about it, unfortunately. Or fortunately, as a matter of fact, because you're going to burn it anyway, right? So you can't waste any money anymore either, so that's good. But yeah, so focus on revenue. Nothing else works.
Cool. And, do you have any, I guess, looking forward, any kind of hopes and predictions, any kind of, is there some, positivity that you're trying to look forward to, maybe? Trying to end on a good note.
Let me think, because
It is challenging times, yes, but
Yeah. I mean, I don't think Bitcoin can go much lower, so that's good. In fact, let me just open up the chart right now, because to be honest, that's not true. It can very easily go much lower to like 68K, probably even lower than that. Depends what's going on, to be honest. There's a theory out there that Trump is just absolutely destroying the markets in order to cause the crash very quickly. So then, he can recover within his term and bring everything back to normal. There's another theory about, I don't know, I can't remember. It was so weird, but whatever, doesn't matter. So the macro economy is looking very bleak. People in general are absolutely running out of money. The average person has no money pretty much left spare after work. So after all their expenses, right? The general market for companies is also very bleak. Crypto is looking very bleak. The stock market with Trump is looking very bleak. The fundamentals are also looking very bleak in the sense that, again, like people are starting to realize this crypto thing really isn't going to be changing the world. And if it is, it's going to be like one project at a time where crypto is in the back end. Because, we had 15 years of so much hype and there's just nothing that's been done with it, basically. Like, people will say, oh, what about that project that's working with that government? No one cares. I'm sorry, but no one cares about that project. And it's definitely not going to bring mass adoption, right? So that's looking very bleak. The positive thing that I'd say is kind of what I said at the very beginning, is the tech is definitely here to stay, right? Whether you use tokens or whether you don't have a token, or whether you can have a token if you want, right? I think tokens have genuinely changed the landscape for companies and for traditional systems of how we interact with our customers, how we interact with our partners, how we incentivize people, how we create decentralized elements or even entire decentralized products. I think that's fantastic, right? And I think the tech side coupled with that, coupled with the tech side is definitely a new paradigm. So there will be new products out there. Like, for example, you have Deepin, you have things like Filecoin, which is decentralized storage. Again, nobody cares. I guarantee you Filecoin has maybe like 2 users in total, because who cares when you have AWS or just Google Cloud or whatever? Nobody is using Filecoin. I will die on that. What's it called? Die on that sword? I don't know what the phrase is. But you get what I mean, right? But in the future, people will be using projects like Filecoin, whatever the next Filecoin will be, because this Filecoin will eventually run out of money because, again, no one is using it, so they're definitely not making any money. Projects like that, I think, are great. And, the tech that allows them and the whole principle, the entire principles behind these projects are very good. So, if you're in the industry, either if you're a service provider, try to find these select projects, these very good projects that are actually trying to change the world and are genuinely interested in the tech and are innovating and so on. Work with them. If you're a founder, just remember, forget the token, forget the crypto side. Just remember, you're a company, right? You're providing a good or a service, right? Do you need crypto? You probably don't. Do you need a token? You probably don't. Just build a business if you really want to build a business. And if that's too much effort, join a startup, because it's basically the same thing, but with a lot less stress, right, than having your own company. So that's actually another amazing advice that I'd say to anyone. Have a startup if you don't want to have your own business, because working in corporate is very boring and basically suicide inducing. So join a startup, right? But join a good one. And I think, you have institutions joining for a reason. You have big banks, you have very massive trading firms that are becoming market makers and, incubators like Cumberland or Amber Group or whatever. They work with very good projects, right? And for projects that are actually, benefiting society in one way, shape or form. And they're coming in and they have a lot of money, so that's also another thing. It's like, get closer to them. I think it'll be, a great use of time, and, especially something that we're trying to get, involved with as well. So to answer the question again, there's great tech, there are good projects or good companies, there are good institutions, and the future is definitely looking good. And it's looking good as soon as you realize that it's not going to be as hypey and as pumpy and as bullish as everyone thought it would be, or as revolutionary as people thought it would be. So on that kind of paradigm of, well, the tech is still here, it's actually not doing too bad, because all that's happening is we're washing out all of the scammers basically from the industry. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, but if you have any last words to leave our listeners with, or what's the easiest way to connect to you, but we will include all the links in the description so people can just click on there.
Yeah, I think I've spoken for way too long. But connect me on LinkedIn or Telegram. It's just Alex_Simplicity. Nice and simple.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much for doing this episode with us. It was a real pleasure.
Likewise. Pleasure, guys.
Well, thanks to all listeners for listening up to this point, and have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.